Now, here's the deal, friends. If you're looking for the enemy, our enemies and the enemies of our republic are easy to find. They're in our own capitals in D.C. and right here in OKC. It's not very difficult to find them. The problem is we haven't been doing this. How long are we going to stand by in fear and do nothing? There was a man, good. There was a man who lived in Hitler's Germany. He tells the story of his little church where he attended. He said every Sunday the trains would rattle past our church. And he said finally we learned that those trains were filled with Jews being taken to concentration camps. He said that disturbed us. In fact, he said literally their screams tormented us. He said, but we had to figure out what are we going to do? So here was their solution. They knew exactly when those trains would come by their church on Sundays. So he said we would start singing, and by the time the train got to our churchyard, we were singing so loud we couldn't hear. We would sing at the top of our voices. And he said if any one of those screams came through, we'd just sing louder. And that was their solution. Now, I want you to listen to what he said. He said, years have passed, and no one talks much about it anymore. But I still hear that train whistle in my sleep. I can still hear them crying out for help. God, forgive all of us who called ourselves Christians, yet did nothing to intervene. Now, so many years later, he said, I see it happening all over again in America. He said, the response is the same as it was in my country, silence. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a pastor in Germany during World War II, said this: silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. Now, Oklahomans, how long will we remain silent? How many liberties are we willing to surrender so we can remain comfortable? The freedom of speech? The freedom of religion? The right to assembly, the right to keep and bear arms. How many? Patrick Henry, you heard from just a while ago, said this: is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take. And then here's the famous phrase, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Now that is the kind of an American that we need today. Although not my favorite president, Franklin Roosevelt did say something one time worth repeating. He said, Americans would rather die on our feet than live on our knees. Now, friend, I think that phrase should become our motto. We need to live out the truth. I'd rather die on my feet for liberty than live on my knees under tyranny. When those 56 men signed that Declaration of Independence, and they were there signing their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honors, you know what they were saying? We'd rather die on our feet than live on our knees. When George Washington and those 12,000 soldiers were starving to death at Valley Forge in the bitter cold, you know what they were saying? We'd rather die on our feet than live on our knees. I hold in my hands right here an 1851 Springfield musket. It was carried in the war between the states by a man named William Maynard. As he carried this rifle fighting for the Army of Tennessee, do you know what he was saying? He was saying, I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. That is a phrase that we need to memorize. That's a phrase we need to use. When the doughboys of World War I spilled their blood in those muddy trenches in Europe, and the next generation of Americans died on blood-soaked beaches like in Normandy and Iwo Jima and Guadalcanal. You know what they were saying? They were saying we'd rather die on our feet than live on our knees. When our soldiers died on the hills of Korea, in the jungles of Vietnam, and in the sands of Kuwait, Iraq, and Afghanistan, they were and they are still saying, I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. Well, friend, I have good news tonight. We've got them on the run. You just heard it a while ago. The liberals are dropping like flies. They're refusing to run for re-election because they know there's no need. I think 3 bit the dust this week. A recent Gallup poll shows this about America. Now, 40% claim to be conservative, 36% claim to be moderate, and only 21% will admit that they have any type of liberal belief structure. Now, don't be deceived. Friends, they hear us. We are having a huge impact. Now that we've got them on the run, we can't afford to let up. As I said at the beginning of this speech, I'm here to raise a regiment to fight the good fight for liberty and truth. Friends, I know not what course you will take, but I want you to know, as for me, I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. Will you join me? Will you join this regiment? Would you rather live in freedom and in liberty and die on those feet than live on those knees? Then if you will join me, I'm going to ask you to repeat after me. It's right there on the screen. I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. Now, I want to hear it one more time. I want to hear you. I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. Friends, my prayer is that God will bless you and that God will somehow be able to bless America again. Thank you so much for